Hey, what's going on? This is Khaliq Glover, also known as Khaliq-O-Vision, and we are live doing our weekly hangout. I wanted to get on here today and talk about some of the gear and stuff that's upcoming. We saw a lot of stuff at NAM and seeing a lot of stuff in magazines, and I have a surprise for you guys about compressors coming out real soon that it's going to be some next level stuff. So I've been trying to get a lay of the land for what's going on with a lot of different gear and specifically with compressors, hardware and software, what's out there, what's on the landscape, finding out what the challenges are with what's been available, what has worked, what hasn't worked, or what's understood, what's not understood, all these things. So I think it'll be kind of a good spirited discussion today, and plus kind of seeing how things work within different genres of music, because it's funny how when you think about using the tools that we use in trying to be successful with our projects and our music, you have to approach each one different. Even though the tools kind of stay the same for everybody, they're approached all differently. So I have the way I use it for the type of music that I do, which is more like of R&B, mainstream pop, some hip hop, some jazz, things like that. And a different approach has to be taken for each one all the time. So it's interesting to me to see that one tool that I would normally use for like say R&B, for example, and they're always my go-to tools. Sometimes those particular tools, while they all can work, it's interesting that they all can work. An EQ is an EQ, and a compressor is a compressor, and all that, for the most part, as far as in general what they do. So the difference is the subtleties, and the subtleties is what we hear in our heads. When we're mixing or recording or whatever we're doing, we kind of get a vision in our mind's ear of what it's supposed to be like before it actually exists. And what's interesting to me is now, over the course of years, certain things, like when I use certain compressors, certain EQs and all that, I also can kind of envision and imagine the electronics, if they're a hardware box, or the signature that gets imparted, if it's software, or hardware. It's pretty interesting because you kind of hear it in your head, but it doesn't really exist yet until you kind of craft it out and carve it out and make it happen. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk with people and kind of see some of the tools that they work with, why they work with them. I'll present a couple of things that I do and think about, and just kind of see where, I know, like, for example, I've learned a lot from just doing these hangouts with everybody here, because everybody has different tools. Everybody's all over the internet, so you can find all kinds of stuff. Just last week when we were on, Bill Kamek mentioned quite a few tools yesterday. The last time, that were free downloads. It was very useful tools. An MS tool that was very useful, and even if you have them in some form, putting on a different program can sometimes make a slight difference that just suddenly makes your music take on this intangible thing. So, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. I got Jason on here too. What's up, Jason? How you doing, man?
How's it going? How's everything? Things are good.
Doing all right, man. You chilling in the studio today? You get a day off for a change?
I'm home today, which is a good thing. I had a band rehearsal that was canceled today, so I'm just chilling at the house.
Okay. Hey, hold on for a hot second. Um, okay, this is weird, very weird. Something must be going on with my. I'm sending out I'm sending out invitations inside the Hangout to people, and like we got Dave, and Dave, you said you just sent me a message that you're watching live. Go to the Pensado students group, and I posted the link there. Because for whatever reason inside the Hangout, I'm sending them out. I send them out to Bill. I send it out to everybody, and nobody's getting on for some reason. So Go ahead, Dave, and click that main link that's in the Pensado students, and you'll be able to get in. And anybody else out there, if you guys want to join us live on the inside, we can take up to 10 people inside. So we're just getting started. So now's a good time to get in if you want to get in. Um, I've got to figure out what that problem is. Have you ever had that problem, Jason?
Yeah, last week I had that problem. Me and Neil were having a problem getting in last week for some reason. I don't know what's been going on with this Google thing. It's been acting kind of weird recently.
You know, they change their algorithms all the time, constantly. Them and Facebook, they're always changing stuff, so you never know behind the scenes what's happening. But I mean, I'm doing nothing any different than I've been doing for the last year or so, and suddenly people aren't getting the messages, so I have to suss that one out because you know, everybody's sending me messages like can't get in or the link isn't working or something like that. But you got in. How did you get on, Jason?
I saw the link in Pensado students and just clicked on
Okay,
it.
that's good. So that link is working at least. Because I sent you a direct link because you're on my circles inside of the Hangouts, but you didn't get that one, huh?
No, I don't think so. I'll double check again, but I don't think so. No.
That is so weird. Okay. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with that. Let me try it a different way again. And everybody that's watching, I appreciate you watching. If you want to get on live, go to the Pensado students group and just go ahead and click on the link. I just posted it in both places. I have it in the main place for Pensado students, and I also have it in the Pensado students Hangouts. So either one of those, you guys should be able to get on directly with that. For some reason, my invitations are not going through, but we'll solve that one later at another time. Uh, and what I'm going to do, Jason, then now that I know that I'm going to send Dave and Bill direct links via their email. So weird, so strange. Wow. Jason, you're still there?
Yeah, that was a weird one. It kicked me out on my other account and brought me back in on this one. Interesting.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was like, I see two Jasons now. Okay. Very, very strange. Okay. So the life of internet world. Okay, I'm gonna copy this link and send it over to Dave via email real quick, and then we'll be good. So this is the stuff because when you get a flow and it kind of breaks your flow, I was ready to go with a bunch of stuff and handling technical stuff is not fun. Okay, so
No, I hear you totally.
yeah, okay, so let's compose and send to Dave and send to Bill. And I'll take care of the other folks later. Okay. Dave hasn't come on yet, so I assume he's still having problems for some reason. Dave, if you're watching us, I just sent you an email, so check your email. You should get it. That'll that should work and get you what you need to get in. It should say today's hangout. Okay, and in the meantime, we're going to continue. So anyway, I guess I want to get back, Jason, and talk about some things in particular. And I love that I have you on here today too, because especially since so you kind of specialize even in your recording and stuff. Is it mainly metal and stuff like that? Is that where your main specialty is? What you really enjoy?
Well, actually, I actually hate recording metal, to be totally honest.
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm more of a, I don't know, I'm kind of old school in my approach nowadays. I mean, when I was younger, yeah, it was great. I mean, I started in hip hop,
Mm-hmm.
but then but I was always a hard rock guy, personally. And I don't know, more recently, I'm finding myself, I like more like the indie stuff, the stuff that I can cut live and real without all pro tooling it to death.
Yeah.
That's what I'm really into these days. I have a lot of fun with that stuff.
Yeah, man. And I love that you do that too, because you by doing that as well, you really have to and I know you have the old school mentality as far as, because we talked about it before, of really capturing it at the source instead of, like you said, having to go in and do a bunch of pro tooling and or whatever DAWs people use. So what kind of tools and gear, some of your go-to stuff, but have you seen some new stuff on the horizon that's really piqued your interest that would stand up to the time?
Not so much in the hardware world really nowadays as in I've seen in the plugin world that's really got me kind of excited. You were mentioning compressors earlier, and I've been looking at the new the Lindell that's coming, and the new Waves 160s really got me intrigued because I'm a big 160 fan.
Oh,
Hardware 160, and if the if the plug-in comes even close, it'd be nice because I only got one 160. It'd be nice to be able to use a chain of them.
Well, have you ever used Universal's 160? Universal Audios?
I have not. Yeah, I'm fortunate enough that the place I work out of has a real legit old school 160, and it's amazing. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, there's nothing like that. Describe what it sounds like to you. Like 160s, for example. Well, they're amazing on everything, but in particular, they just have a magic when you put them on drums, like kick and snare and stuff like that. But describe your experience with them.
There's just a punchiness about them that I really like. I think it's the way the compressor kind of I don't know. It's just the way it attacks and it releases. The only other way I can describe it is very musical.
Yeah.
I mean, when you find that sweet spot, it just makes everything sound so damn good. Like you were saying, there's really no bad use for it. I mean, I've used it on vocals, I've used it on guitars, I've used it on bass, on drums.
Yeah.
All kinds of stuff. I mean, it's just a very musical compressor. I mean, that's really the best way to describe it, I guess. It just has this very natural this natural feel, this natural swing to it, and it's one of my favorite compressors in the world because of it.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned too, because for vocals I used it. One of the things the late and great legendary singer Donna Summer, she used to like that too. She was pretty amazing because she she was one of the few vocalists that would come in and know just what she wanted gear-wise that works for her voice. She had learned that early on, we're talking about way, back in the 80s or whatever. But she knew what mics, so she would know that her voice sounded good on a 414, for example, with a 160 and stuff like that. That was pretty impressive, because you don't never hear that from singers usually. So it really works good on pretty much anything, and you can't go wrong with something like that. And it's so simple. It's just like the 160 and the LA2A. Those two things are like they just dial it in to be so simple that you can use them on anything pretty much.
Yeah, that's the one thing I love about it. I mean, it's the first compressor I ever really used when I was getting into things that I really, I guess, noticed the compression and really understood how to use it.
Yeah.
All of the settings are. I mean, none of them are bad, but it just, when you use it, you can hear the differences in it. There's something like with a 76 or something where, 76s are a bit different. You have all these buttons on the front, and you got the way you got to dial it in order to make it attack and release just right. It's not like the 160. The 160, you just dial it to whatever you're going to dial to, and you can flip through the settings, on the one switch, and you just get this beautiful. You can hear it. That's the only really way I can explain it. It's so hard to explain audio in words.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's interesting. That's exactly how I learned as well, man. So we have that in common because that was a go-to compressor because you could, I don't know, however the electronics made it work and everything, it lets just enough of the attack come through so that little punch thing comes on there, but yet it doesn't it doesn't overly aggressively capture the attack and smooth things out. It doesn't let too much out, so it's not too slow. It's just right, so it works. It's fast enough to control and tame a drum without rounding it off and softening it and making it sound muted and flaccid, so it helps the punch. Then the other part of it is however they have the release part built in, because when you put it on a snare, you could hear it stretch the snare. That's the first time I could hear it. With the other ones, you got to really know what you're doing and dial it in. So when I put that on, and it was just a matter of finding the right amount and ratios, and there was something about that when you could suddenly hear it, and it's like, whoa, okay, now I see what's going on. I see what they mean now. There's no release knob on this, but I actually hear something on that release side of this sound. Okay, I kind of get it now. And then I started using what I imagine for, like you said, when you get on an 1176 or anything else that has more control, but you have to actually go in and really shape it. The 1176, I got to say, drove me crazy because the knobs are in reverse. So when you think you're for years, in fact, I used to work it just like everything else. You think when you're turning it clockwise, you think that you're slowing things down, and it took me for years until I actually found a manual. Because let's face it, I mean, I'm not afraid to admit it, but I know it's been the case with most people. When you're trying to learn how to use a compressor, most people simply put something on and just start turning stuff until they think it sounds good. Half the time you don't know what's going on. You see ratio, but I mean, I've never been good in math and stuff like that. So ratio, okay, it's just a term. What the heck is going on?
I mean, really, I mean, compression is one of those things that, it eludes a lot of people in the beginning. I talk to a lot of the newer guys from Pensado a lot, and I was talking to one the other day. I won't mention who, but we were talking about, he kept talking about gear, and the stuff that he has at his house is decent enough for him to get a good mix on, But he's just like, dude, well, I want to get this, and I want to get, and he's listing all this stuff. I want to buy a distressor, and I want to get an 1176, and I want to get this. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
I said, do me a favor. Tell me what compression is. And he was just kind of dumbfounded, that I would ask a question like that, And he goes, well, I can't really tell you what compression is, but I can describe for you what I do with compression. I was like, no, tell me what compression is. Explain. I don't want to know how you use it. I get how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of the thing. I mean, anybody can regurgitate stuff from a book, but being able to use it musically is totally different. It's a completely different animal. And I think I mean, when we talk, we wind up getting into this all the time, and I don't want to get back into this theory again of the old guys versus the new guy, theory versus blah, 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 blah. I don't want to get into that conversation.
Right.
Because it always gets us in the same place.
Yeah.
We always just agree to disagree, and then it's the end of it. But, I really think that if these guys, if they took some, oh man, it just leads me back to that same damn discussion again, and I won't get into it.
Yeah. No.
You sound like an old guy, huh?
I am an old guy. Leave me alone.
Yeah. Well, the thing is it's just foundational, because there's no right or wrong. We learn. I identify with what that guy was talking about because, in fact, and Dave is my witness. He saw. I mean, I literally had all the stuff that you mentioned. At some point, I owned pretty much almost everything. The only thing that I didn't ever own was like the real elite stuff, like Fairchilds and all that, because it was just too far out of my reach. But if it was anywhere within the realm of possibility, I would figure out a way to get it and think I needed it. And the funny thing is at this stage in my life, pretty much all that stuff is gone because I've come to realize now that it's not about that. You asked the perfect question. you got to understand, well, what is compression? Why are you doing, or what are you trying to do in the first place with it? And if you understand that, you really can literally use any compressor. If you're trying to EQ, you can literally use any EQ if you understand what it is where you're trying to get on the back end. The difference is the subtleties in each one, and that stuff, I mentioned it in the beginning, that's in our heads. Nobody else has heard it yet, so it doesn't matter, you know. So when I'm trying to get a good mix, and if I'm changing from one compressor style to another, it's because I'm hearing something invisible in here that gives me that little subtlety. But the bottom line is nobody else out there hears and knows that. And if I know that ultimately, if I have no other choices, and I just need to compress and control this sound so that it is constrained within what I need and gluing everything together, any compressor will work if you understand how to set it up and use it. You know, a lot of people don't get that.
You know, one thing that makes compression challenging today is that, you know, when we use the word compression, today we could be talking about data compression as well. You know, so we have a term that started out as an application in the studio and has now grown into an actual process that we use when we're organizing our recorded data. Very similar in analogy, but it's very amazing that we're using the same damn word. And I think sometimes in the misinformation, as we analyze it as old guys, right? In the misinformation, I could easily see how someone who comes into understanding compression through a data sense first, then extends that word to try and understand it in a audio acoustic space sense. I can see where sometimes it can lead you down another way, you know. Or just, you know, kind of we've got a convolution of terms now. We probably had no idea it was going to go that way.
Well, you know, it's interesting that you said that too. That's a great way to think about it. Think about all the different ways of compression. I mean, just think about, I mean, I'm in a small room. This room has sound compression.
Compression, right.
Of the air in the room, you know, that's another kind. We've got data compression, like you said, but there's all kinds, you know. We're on a Google Hangout, which is using video compression right now. You know, this is why it's so important, you know, that you have to understand what compression is.
Compression is,
you're trying to do. Yeah.
But then that goes back to his original question to the guy, Jason's original question of why. See, and even in the why, there's an understanding of, well, yeah, okay, this is why I'm doing it, because there's so many different types of compression that we use. We're audio people having a discussion, but how many different types of compression do we use, period? Aside from the audio compression, we're using these other forms too. Data, video, we're using them all. We're using them all. And yes, the function is the same, but when you try and apply it, I think there's a way you can kind of look at it that helps you understand everything. You know, it's kind of like, I think we run into that a lot now with digital terms. I'll put it like that. Everything that we do in the analog space or learn in the analog space, it has a digital brother or sister, right? And we have to learn how that function is. Okay, we're talking analog sense, you're talking digital sense, because there is a separate path, separate, not necessarily equal.
Yeah.
Because when you're compressing digital data and things like it, you're taking on a different. I go back to analog because I think analog. You're just taking a different path. You're taking a different path, and you're treating the data differently than the traditional analog compression. I think the traditional analog compression also gave the people who were formulating the new digital products we use, the analog compressors of the past gave them a way to write code to understand what it was doing, right? Because they had the ability to analyze the analog signal. They had the ability to look at that signal on a graph. Then they could take that graph and apply it to a data table and apply it to digital ones and zeros and do it and turn it into a math calc that gives you the ranges you now have when you go to your digital compressors, right? But the analog analyzation of that process is what helped them get us these other tools that we use. Even the ones that look like an 1176 on the screen, and it, you know, if they really wanted to make it cool, what you could do is you could, every third 1176 that you pull up would have a different, slightly different algorithm, because every 1176 in life is different. You know, you're not going to
came up with a new product, man. The random 76.
Well, you know, I think if, you know, and this is one for all the plug-in people that listen, I think if anybody was to do a new product, it would be to give you something that did give you a variable based on the AC fluctuations of any of this analog gear, because
that's a
that's the big
very good thing there. I mean,
that we deal with. You know,
really, everybody should put that parameter in their plugins as an algorithm. Because think about it. I mean, and I learned some of this from with you. You know, hanging around and learning that just the electricity going through the building can make a difference in how the sound is on one unit. I used to carry my unit with me, something that I own, and it would actually sound different when I went to different studios, and I didn't realize to listen for that. You know.
Yeah. I was watching a thing that came on the internet yesterday. It was Eddie Van Halen from the Smithsonian, and he was saying how he messed with guitars and he would do different things to get the sound he wanted. And one of the things he did was get a variac, which is just a variable attenuator, and he would turn the attenuator up to feed his amplifier AC, and he didn't look at the amplifier they had just bought and realized it had been turned, it had been converted, or he hadn't changed the power supply over for 220. So he bought and thought, oh, I got a new amp, it's going to sound great. He plugged it in and it didn't sound good, so he gets a variac and he turns it up. So it barely, you know, it's barely hitting now, it's warming up, but it sounds good. You know, but he was experimenting with things like that to give him the sound he wanted, because he said, A, I couldn't afford all the different pedals everybody had.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I wanted the sound of this pickup, but I liked the feel of this guitar, and so he was literally tear these things apart and wire them together and try and figure out how to do it. But it was pretty amazing to see how he would go about getting what he wanted, and then it turned into a cottage industry. I mean, just all the other things too, just the things of dipping the pickups in wax and just a lot of that stuff. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah, man.
I mean, I didn't mean to get off compression, but I was just...
No, I mean, it totally ties into what we were saying about, you know, I mean, even the compressors. I mean, the power is definitely going to make a difference in the way, you know, every transistor or every tube and everything in that unit is going to fluctuate based on that, you know. And I mean, I sit in front of me with an AC voltage meter on my desk every day. I watch this boy go from 119 to 100 to 99 to 85.
Yeah.
All over the place. You know, and that definitely makes a difference. I mean, I notice a difference in my mixes on days when I'm getting good power into the house and days when I'm not. You know, I mean, I shouldn't say house. I mean, I'm in an apartment. And, you know, I got people constantly moving in and out and putting stuff in their place and taking it out. So my AC voltage fluctuates a lot in this place. And I definitely notice a difference in even the sound coming out of my monitors when I'm having starved power days. You know, days when my power's running at about 95, 96, I definitely notice a difference. And I'm like, well, I'm just not going to mix today. I got to do it on a day where I got at least 100 coming in, and I'm good.
Yeah. And it's funny, a lot of people don't realize, I mean, that affects everything. So when you're in capture mode, for example, and your preamps aren't getting the right power through your microphone and stuff like that, it can make a huge difference on the way you capture, you know.
Yeah. And if you guys work in apartments, those metered power conditioners, if you just plug it in, plug all your gear in and watch it, you know, you should monitor the high-low of your facility where you're at and write the numbers down and write down the times. Notice, you know, in the midday when everybody's at work, how high the power is in the building. And notice maybe at night when everybody's cooking dinner, how all of a sudden the building goes low. These are all things that when you have adaptive spaces, you got to kind of realize.
Yeah.
Gotta
And
kind of
Dave
realize.
showed me back in the day how to look at things like how many amperes are being consumed by various things. When you just
Mhm.
turn something on, each thing has an amount that it's sucking up every time
Yeah.
something gets on, and other things in your house as well. So that it doesn't have to be just in the studio. It's just in the it's wherever, whatever's in that proximity, and Dave, I want you to address that real quick. But Jason brought up something cool on YouTube. Here's this good old
Oh
thing.
yeah, yeah.
You guys,
It's a variac. Yep.
the Variac everybody was
Yep.
mentioning. That's a big
That's the
deal
ultimate
because
tool there to teach you what's going on.
yeah.
You know.
I mean, explain that, Dave, to what that is.
Another thing. Well, it's a variable voltage attenuator. So you would plug this into the wall, and you see the black extension cord that's right there. Do you ever see my mouse moving around?
We can't see it on the
You
thing,
see
but
you see the black cord plugged in.
right.
Yeah. So that goes to your devices, or we go to your power strip, let's say, and then the knob picture is you would basically have a meter on this. You'd put a meter in your outlet plug, and then you would meter when you were getting true 120 volts, and you would turn this up to where you get 120. And if it started to drift down, you'd notice when it drift down. And usually we would do a plus minus 5. So 120, you let it drift to 124 or so, and then down to 117. Usually it's in and around there, but this is used to stabilize the voltage. This right here, the dial is connected to a big coil. Okay, it's just imagine a big light dimmer, if you want to think of it like in terms of a big dimmer switch.
Yeah.
But it's like a dimmer switch, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a dimmer switch. Some of them have ceramic inside them. They get very hot because what they're doing is regulating the electricity. So that thing is actually containing and soaking up the heat. So it's actually coils on a winding wrapped around a ceramic to dispense the heat. But
Is that an isolation transformer?
well, that's a variac right there. That's not an isolation. Isolation transformer is another device that you can plug in and then plug this into, and then do both of them. You isolate and then regulate. So that they're two different functions.
One filters, right?
Yeah, one filters and the other one regulates. So, and that's we could go into the days on all those products. But one thing I was going to say back to the compression conversation, we were talking about analog digital. Back in the day, I learned. You guys talking about DBX? I learned on the 165A broadcast compressor. One of the things I first noticed is that when I would go to all the broadcast facilities to do the shows, the radio shows, and I would see the same compressor in use all the time. Every time, everywhere I went, I would see little hashtags on it where everybody had written for their show, where the setting was. And I'm like, wow, man, it's always different. And then one day, one of them broke. So I saw the guy go inside, and he starts to replace it. I look inside, and there's certain components in there with capacitors. And so I said, well, it looks like this one blew. He said, yeah, but I just can't replace it with anything. I have to get these right here. So he shows me a certain style of capacitor. And I'm saying this to make a point. Back in the day, before all this digital stuff, in order to make sure your equipment was running, you couldn't just go down to the store and get any old thing and put it inside, even though it had the same readouts on the part, and you still can't to this day, because certain capacitors pass audio well, and certain capacitors don't pass audio well. So what would happen is if you just went by the schematic and just replaced something, or the part blew up and you could recognize the thing, so you went and grabbed something, you could probably get it to work, but it wouldn't sound the same. You wouldn't sound the same. You'd hear some high whine, you hear something, because it wasn't of the caliber to be able to put inside a piece of precision audio gear where everything else had been what they call precision matched, right?
This is why knockoff gear doesn't work so
right.
well.
Right, and I say that because transfer that information now to the digital world. The digital world doesn't take things like that into consideration, again, because by the time your digital 1176 on the screen gets created, it is nothing but a mere picture of the one unit that they had to analyze that day when they were said, we're going to make an 1176 software thing. So they didn't use 10 different units to take 10 different sets. They used one unit, analyze it, say, okay, this is our 1176. Okay, one Fairchild, oh, this is our Fairchild. And that's the thing. The analog gear is so particular. It knows what even component that it likes to see in order to keep passing everything well. And it knows what component it doesn't want to see, and it rejects it. It rejects it by giving you bad audio, by giving you no operation, no bandwidth, no control. And again, you can have two components with the right nomenclature on the component. Put it in, and it just won't work. It just it's hard to believe, because a lot of times when you go to trade school, you're going, well, hey, this one says this, and this one says this, and it's the same, but it's not. It's not. And so that's something to remember whenever you're dealing with the analog gear. You know, try and do a little history and learn about what parts that, especially the compressor, especially the DBX stuff, when you're trying to bring it back to life, what parts they like to see. If you go on some of the chat rooms, they'll tell you. I mean, we get a lot of our antique parts and stuff from. God, I'll think of the name and put it up. What is it? Key code.
Key sub.
No, DigiKey. DigiKey is a company that we get a lot of audio grade parts from. So if we run into the same thing on SSLs, like early SSLs. If you go to recap a fader, I'm going to recap my console. I'm going to do this. You can't just use any caps. You have to get some caps that are going to pass audio well and not going to get inside the circuit and make it noisy. So then you've done yourself an injustice if you just go after, oh, I got a cheap price on all these caps. No, but they're not audio grade parts. You know? So
Hey,
just a little trivial knowledge. Sorry.
Yeah. And here's the other thing that I wanted to say, because the parallel of that also is, okay, we're talking about analog hardware, but it still applies to digital as well, because like you said, they'll go in and get this one unit that they consider pristine and everything, but that's one unit with one signature. Then here's what everybody has to realize too. They get a crew or whatever to take all the pictures. So it may look exactly like an 1176. The best lighting and the best lighting for the best, all this stuff and everything. But really what it comes down to, so when you listen to one manufacturer versus another and everything, it comes to who wrote that algorithm. There's a term that we talked about earlier that it's not as much of an issue these days as it used to be back in the day, but there's a term called interpolation. And when algorithms are written, digital is based on ones and zeros, so either off or on. But if you have somebody that got lazy and wrote off up here and then on down here and that was it, you're going to have something that's going to make a drastic drop. And there's a whole space that has to be traveled to get from 1 to 0. That's where this signal is interpolating between. And if they don't get that right, and everybody does it differently because it's math, So you get one guy who writes the code this one way, but another guy can get the same job and write it a whole different way with a lot more internal points in there, and that makes a difference in how it sounds. So, and plugins as well as hardware, they all have their little signatures, and even if it looks exactly the same, the picture was perfect and everything. You got to get back to listening and being sure that this is doing all the stuff in between steps.
Well, plus too.
Are you saying we actually have to use our ears to?
Oh, what a concept, man!
No,
I
no,
can't
gotta
just read
look
the
at the
packet.
numbers.
I
Gotta
can't
look
just
at the numbers.
I got to listen to the damn thing.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Something crazy, man.
In some cases, you actually have to listen to the music and the.
There was a time when DBX had made the 160X. That was the first version of live compressor that we used to use. I mean, the 160s were studio units, but when you took them out using live, it usually beat the hell out of them.
Yep.
But the 160X was a rack mount, one space. Went to the 160XT, went to the 160A, 160XTA or something.
Yeah,
they had
yeah.
a couple different renditions, but it's just an example that when it was the 160X, it was cool, right? The minute the company changed hands and they went to the XT, you could tell it was being made at a different place because the metalwork was slightly different, the knobs were slightly different, and the sound was slightly different. The way how quick it responded was really drastic. And then if you were like me, because at the time we didn't have live stuff that had everything inside, so you usually had about 4 just compressions that you carried or whatever to mix live. If you had a mixture, it was really uncomfortable because you could be, when you're doing live, you want gear that you can really feel that right point where you go, okay, that's where I need it right here. And I found that the newer ones, you know what? When that company took over, that product started getting made differently because it doesn't react the same, doesn't sound the same, doesn't feel the same. And that was like that with a lot of things. A lot of things where the version of the product that hit was great, and then as the product cycle went and they started down the line or the company changed hands, you can tell when certain things happen. And yeah, you've got to use your ears. You got to use your ears and what you know to be true, especially with things like compression and how much range you're going to. Everything is just real important, especially in a live setting. Which is why I commend most of the guys today who are the young guys doing the digital stuff and when they mix live, to be able to do everything based on the total trust of the software that's available now is incredible. Just to be able to mix a show and your entire rack is in your board and it just comes up on your screen. It's a lifesaver, but it also means all these guys are really doing their work. They're using their ears a lot in live every day because that's a lot to discern, and they have way more effects to choose from now.
Yeah, my head's up. Now I want to talk about something interesting. And what's up, Andrew and Brad? We didn't get a chance to say hi to you guys.
Hey guys.
On there. But real quick, I just wanted to talk to. I got to tell you too. Over the course of the years, when I first used to buy equipment, especially hardware, I was scared, because it took a lot to get the money to get certain things, But Dave got me to stop being afraid and say, hey, man, take these screws off and take a look inside, And I was so impressed on some things and so unimpressed on certain other things, Like, I was really surprised some of these things, especially when, if I had just spent $4,000 or $5,000 on something, I wanted to open it up. Now, I got to say, I was never disappointed when, for example, I'll take, say, like Manly. If I opened up a Manly unit and looked inside, oh man, it was like, okay, this sounds like what I paid. It looks like what I paid on the inside and the way it sounds, Then you get some other ones and just like 3 transistors inside and a squirrel or something.
Yeah.
You ever look inside an 1176? There's really not much in there, to be honest.
That's true.
There's not much in it.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
That's one of those cases when if it works, okay,
Yeah.
Compressed
Or,
warm up a couple caps and you're good. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, man. So, but it's an interesting thing, and plus now that's not as much of a thing because they just gotten so good with what's going on in whatever they put the digital circuit, especially analog control. Digitally controlled analog units and stuff like that. But that used to. But even like I said, even now to this day, there's certain manufacturers where okay, you can see the quality when you take the stuff apart and everything. You can see that they really meant to go from end to end. That everything is going to be just perfect and spot on as it could be, totally matched on the inside and everything. But I never used to do that for a long while. It's very educational, you know. But you really have to do the same thing even with plugins, as far as, even though you can't take them apart or whatever. It's about, like we said too, listen to your ears and the subject matter, and do some comparisons and see how, even though it may look the same, how one compares to the other. See if you can hear differences and subtleties. You know, focus on one area. You know, if you're dealing with compressors like we've been talking about, you know, don't just take compression as the broad term. Listen and see what's going on. How is this thing handling the attack? You know, how is it handling how it's releasing? When it's attacking, how do the threshold interact and change along with attacks and their ratio? And is the ratio a true ratio? Does the ratio sound like what it's marked on there? Is 2 to 1 sound like it's 2 to 1, or is it overshooting it or underdoing it according to what my ears are telling me? You know, if I put it into so-called limiting mode, is it really kicking into limiting mode like I need it to, or is it just kind of there, you know? And what's happening, you know, you really have to get familiar with some of these things, and that is a lot of times where and we're passing it on now, there's a lot of times where our experience from having dealt with both lets people know that, hey, you have to look at both. You can't rely on just what you see on a screen by itself.
That's a very, very, very important point, you know, and I talk to my interns about that stuff all the time. You know, I had a prime example when I had my own studio here in Vegas for a while that I owned, and I had a guy come in, and this kid, just intern, he was going to one of the local schools, you know, and he was good at his craft. You know, his mixes sounded great. You know, he knew what he was doing. But I'd go and I'd look at his stuff when he would mix something, and it not 900 plug, not 900, but you know, all plugins. You know, he'd have this compressor shaving off 3 dB, and this one shaving off 2, and this one doing this and this, to get something that, you know, a single plugin would be able to get if he just understood what he was working with.
Right.
I mean, it's knowing the theory behind. Here we go with this theory thing again. Knowing the theory behind it is a really big thing. You know, one of the things we actually may want to do in these hangouts is we may want to get into like a hardcore compression discussion, because I find with most of the new guys that are coming into the audio world, that's definitely the hardest thing. I mean, you can hear EQ right off the bat.
Right, that's easy.
Even a little 1 dB a boost or a cut. I mean,
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, you know, EQ is simple. Reverbs you can hear, delays you can hear, phasing you can hear. But a lot of guys have a hard time hearing compression. I mean, I didn't hear it for the longest time when I started in this business.
Absolutely.
You know, when I got into this, it was just, I was like, people would talk about compression. I'm like, well, I'm not hearing it, because you're not changing really the way the audio sounds. You know, you're just putting it in this nice little blanket of I don't even really know how to explain it, you know. But I think having a discussion like that would be a really, really good thing. Talk about ratios. You know, what's the difference between 1-to-1 versus 4-to-1, you know, and all that stuff. I think, you know, attack and release and threshold and all this stuff. That, I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory if you understand what it is and how it works.
If you're a mathematician, yeah, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I understand my fractions 2-to-1. I get it.
Yeah. You know, I mean, yeah. Once you get past 2-to-1, I'm done.
No, well, I wouldn't say that. Come on, there's some stuff up above 2-to-1 that you can use really music.
No, I'm just saying, as far as the understanding, I gotta admit, when I saw on there, 2-to-1 compression ratio, then there's 3-to-1. I was like, well, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, but what's that? 4-to-1, okay. So I just use my ears to, okay, now I've got the correlation, but I didn't really know based on, you know, it was always explained, especially, you know, when I was coming up. There was no videos and no guys that were sharing secrets. Nobody told you nothing. So the only explanations were all these technical books and, you know, that really broke it down to the math and showed the waveforms and all that and the scales and it. I'm like, I don't get none of that. Just tell me what the hell to listen for.
I didn't take calculus. Yeah, what the
hell? They're very general rules you learn. You know, 10-to-1 or higher. Higher than 10-to-1, you're limiting.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you hear it and all that. It's like, well, what does
Yeah.
that mean? And then what really threw me, I got to tell you, like when plugins first came on, the transition from analog to digital, and then I got into plugins, and you see Pro Tools, and then you put on a Waves plugin, and you got 50 to 1, or some things 100 to 1. Wait a minute, I thought it was 10 to 1. Where am I supposed to use this? You know.
I find it's easier to
want
hear.
to crush something.
Andrew, what were you gonna say?
I would say like I'm one of these so-called new guys coming up that you're talking about, and I find it much easier to hear like attack and release times, the actual ratio, because hearing the difference between
Right.
obviously a couple of dB can be quite a lot depending on what it is, but like there's a really good thing up on the Pro Audio Files website at the moment, which is like a basic understanding of compression. It's got loads of examples about attack and release stuff, and hearing like sustain properly from like a snare now, it's just like it like blew my mind this week. It was like, oh my god, it just sound longer. I spent ages for just like listening to stuff like this makes no sense, and then watching like these 5 videos, it's like, oh right, yeah, totally. And now when I've been working on stuff this weekend, just trying to get like a bit more bite out of a snare, or trying to make a room feel a little bit bigger, just by like
Yeah, we all get there eventually. But the thing is that it's very confusing because it's such a I don't know how to even describe it, because like I said, you could technically kind of know it. You can have somebody explain it to you, but you just don't get it, because the thing about compression, for me, the hardest thing was I wasn't actually sure what I was hearing until it was too much. That was always the biggest problem.
I think that's why sometimes the conversation nowadays has gone to attack and release times, because the overuse or underuse is resulting in people either hearing breathing or clipping. And so those are naturally the way to discern those is listening to what's going on. Am I hearing, and I think that's why the focus is on the attack and releases now.
Yeah.
Well, my favorite thing in the world right now is all these guys that crush the living hell out of everything and then grab a transient designer to put all the transients back in.
Yeah, right.
That's my favorite thing in the world right now. I see that and I just laugh. It's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
I think part of that too is that they don't understand at the point where you're processing the audio like that, you're now into synthesis, right? So at the point where you're creating all these other things and you're taking it, you might as well be on a modular synthesizer.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing in essence. You're creating all these odd harmonics and trying to basically do feedback and distortion, or
Yep.
Can I ask you guys for some advice on a track about compression, actually? So I'm working on this folk album at the moment, and these guys are sending me stems over, and they've got I think this is the issue. They've got a really cheap like tube preamp with like a little built-in compressor in it, and they don't really know what they're doing. And they've sent me some guitars which I feel sound really, really compressed, and there's no real time for them to re-record it or anything. What's the best way for me to get around that? Can like expanding help with that, or do I just have to kind of put up with it?
Yeah, expansion can definitely help bring it back and everything. I got to tell you, probably for me, some of the best tools they got out there right now, something that could probably help you bring back a lot of that stuff is Fab Filters. I forget which one. I forget what the name of it. The Fab Filter has one, because you can actually see an overlay of your envelope in there of what's happening with the sound and what the compression is doing and everything, and then you can adjust it to actually take out or put in, compensate according to what that waveform is doing in real time, so you can really kind of customize it. Something like that could probably help you bring back some of the dynamics. What else would you say, Jason? You got any ideas for him on that?
I think the Fab Filter one you're talking about is the Pro L.
Yeah.
What it is, the Pro L.
Yeah, Pro L and the Pro C.
The cool thing about it is it actually has a visual representation of everything you're hearing on the screen. So as much as we say don't use your eyes, in a situation like that, Pro Filter L would or FabFilter Pro L would really help you see how it's compressing, and so you can expand and all that based on that. I mean, same thing as we were talking about before. I mean, you could use a transient designer and things like that, but now you're talking about synthesis instead of really. I mean, even with an expander, though, I mean, you're really almost verging on doing that. It's really difficult with compression, man. It's so hard to work with it and make when somebody sends you files that are over compressed, it's something really difficult to deal with. But
a nightmare.
I mean, you could write a fader. I mean, but even that,
Actually, that would probably be the first solution.
That would probably work good. Yeah.
Just write in some automation and write in some dynamics. That would probably be the first thing I would try before anything, just to see if it can be done.
Yeah, and one other thing, a lot of these devices that people have I was just at a breakfast the other morning. We have a thing out here called Tech Breakfast, but
that sounds amazing.
There was a guy there named Aspen Pittman who designs tube gear, and he was making the comment that there's a lot of inexpensive devices that are on the market that feature a final stage of where everything goes through a tube, but they don't in fact go through a tube, because if you remove the tube, it's just there for the placebo. It really does not make a difference. So a lot of these things, they generate just generate nasty harmonics, man. And it's one of those things when people use cheaper devices on the front end or back end. Sometimes, we used to have a way to deal with. Give me an example. There used to be guys who would do cheap, inexpensive drum machine beats, right? There's no way you could turn a cheap, inexpensive drum machine into like a Lin 9000. You couldn't do it. A cheap, inexpensive drum machine sounded like a cheap, inexpensive drum machine. But the way that we figured out how to do it is taking it through a particular DBX 163 was a cheap compression unit. But when you matched it up with a cheap drum machine, it gave you all the ability to squeeze the hell out of that cheap drum machine and give you everything you needed to then lay it in and extract it. So sometimes, I'm not saying run out and get two cheap things to go against each other, but sometimes by trying other methods, even like the volume writing method as well, that you can counteract the things that whatever they felt that final stage usually is that same result, like Jason was talking about, where people just adding things on top of adding things, and they're not realizing that they probably have a pretty decent signal before they started adding all that, right?
Yeah, they were using they had one of the pure Chameleon Labs. I think it's the TS1.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
They've got that beautiful microphone. It has a lovely preamp, and then they're throwing it through this Art Tube MP as well, thinking like more tubes, so that's better. And then it's just like just crushing it. And it's like, what are you doing? Not doing anything about that.
Yeah.
Whenever I have clients that are going to track their own stuff, I always tell them, do not compress anything. Please don't compress anything. I'll handle it on my end. I mean, I've gotten so many sessions where the vocals will just be over compressed to death, or guitars. I mean, distorted guitars. Distorted guitars are already compressed. Why?
Just by nature of distortion.
Why do you need additional compression on that? I don't think have ever, on anything I've ever worked on, compressed a distorted guitar. It's just it doesn't sound real and natural to me. Acoustics, all the time. Yeah. I'll put compression on them. Clean guitars, I'll put compression on them. But when it comes to distorted guitars, even just slightly dirty, I mean, it sounds unnatural to stack. To me, it just sounds unnatural to stack compression on top of compression. Unless you're going for a specific thing or a specific color or flavor.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because when using compression, especially on something like distorted guitars and all that, well, you got to remember that maybe if your plan is to have compression on your final stereo mix bus, then that's going to be going through that. So you don't want to put it and then going through that as well, and everything is just going to stack up. A lot of people think compression is additive, but it's actually what's the other mathematical term? I forgot.
Subtractive.
Subtractive?
No. It's exponential.
Exponential.
Yeah, so it multiplies. It multiplies. It doesn't just add. If you put on 1 2 to 1 and add another 2 to 1, you think you got 4 to 1. That would make sense, but no, it multiplies. You end up towards like 8 to 1 or something like that. So yeah. That's good stuff. Andrew, I was going to ask you too. What, in your opinion, is the biggest challenge with learning how to use compressors? What was the biggest one for you, and what have you seen out there? And then I'm gonna come back to you, Jason, on it, and Dave.
Okay. I would probably say like the utility of it, like when and when not to use one, because you hear so much about people putting compressors on this and that, using control stuff and kind of them just being a necessity in essence. Like I think a lot of people in college or go to school, or like they get told about compression that it's just something everybody does. It's something that you have to do. When it's just like anything, it's a choice. So I think knowing when to use it is probably the most difficult thing, and then how to use it is it's probably easier because it's just you're trying to find the sound that you're after, and if you're after something that's like clipped and crazy, you can do that fairly easy. But the subtlety stuff, I think like really tiny like dynamic change to kind of maybe, for example, in a vocal, like bring the bottom end up, stuff like that. I think is difficult because that takes years of practice and getting to learn the gear you're using and using your ears properly. So yeah, I think it's kind of knowing when and how to use it and not just layering it on everything. And maybe bus compression as well, because I've been trying to crack that for ages. And sometimes like you can hear it and it's like, oh, that sounds amazing, like, especially like rock stuff when you get it just right. But on this folk album I'm working on, like I'm not sure if it needs it or not, but I still want to keep it on just in case. Like I don't know what it's doing, but I feel like it should be there.
When you're starting out on something, do you have what's like your very first starting point where we're all like, as we work through our workflow, we maybe have some starting points pre-set up that we just go from. What is yours as far as like using a compressor is, and what's the go-to instrument that you start with? Is right away I'm gonna go there.
Oh, so like in a session, like what would I start with?
Either in a recording session or a mixing session.
Okay. Well, when it comes to mixing, I always try and work with the drums first, because I kind of feel that a drum sound like either makes or breaks a song. If you've not got a good one, then I don't really care for your song. It might be the best song in the world, but if your snare sounds like a piece of ham being flapped about, I don't really care. Sorry?
Saint anger.
I actually really like the snare on that just because it's crazy and everyone's so angry about it. I'm just like, I think that's brilliant. So yeah, probably drums. And when it comes to using compression and stuff like that, I suppose with drums, I'm just trying to make stuff louder and trying to like make a core and kind of stable like foundation for everything else. I don't really know. I can't think of specific stuff I do on it.
Let me just jump in for a second too, because you said something that's key that I think will be good and helpful for everybody watching us too, because there's two distinct things. You said putting in the compressor on the drums to make it louder, and as a possibility. But here's a distinguishing part. Now that can be a goal too, but an extension of that, I think that may be even more valuable, is to think about using it to make them stable.
Yeah.
Because the thing is that and I always keep going back and keeping the old mixed in with the new. Think about how many old records that we had before compression was so widely used, that these drums can still come on and blow your head off right now to this day. And then if you level match them and make them loud, all of a sudden they sound as good or better than anything that's coming out now with all these tools. So I think a good balance is, and a good thought process is to maybe think about making the drums stable. When I say that, where you ain't got one thing up here, out there, and all that, kind of a stability thing, so that sonically nothing gets lost, and it sounds like one kit as opposed to one smashed ball of pulsing, rhythmic sound. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that's probably the better approach. I suppose when I said make it louder, I'm kind of talking about bringing up, kind of have like ghost notes on stuff, or maybe a thing where a kick pedal's not been hit, as powerful as it should have been at the time. Kind of tying up loose ends in someone's performance, I suppose, is kind of like a good thing compression can be used for to a certain extent. But yeah, definitely like loudness, I suppose, is something different, and you should probably look at that at the end of your mix, and kind of you should better off just getting everything level and the whole thing working together. And if it's quiet, well, that's all right. You can just turn it up somewhere else, or you can just like push the gain and it'll be fine. Yeah, I think that's probably an issue. A lot of people that are kind of in college or learning, that they think compression is for loudness as opposed to dynamic control, which is, I suppose, it's its real job, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's cool. Hey, we got, what's up, stranger? We ain't seen you in a while. Got Angelo back on here. How you doing?
What's going on?
Not much. What you up to? Where you at?
Where am I at? I'm in Florida.
You still in Florida at home right now? See the keyboards back there and all that? Doing your thing, huh?
Got my complete control now. That's pretty cool.
Oh, okay. You all set up and everything? Got stuff the way you want it?
I wish I could say so, but I had a logic board failure just recently, so I'm actually rebuilding my computer and stuff right now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that kind of set me back a couple weeks because I had to send it off to the shop and pick it up and then reload everything. I have an SSD installed now and just rebuilding everything back up. But I've been doing good. Otherwise.
Good for you. Good for you. Cool, cool. Well, welcome back. We're glad to see you again.
Yeah, I changed my name. So.
Yeah, I saw that on there. I was like, who's this coming in?
Right?
That's
so I'm doing good. Just doing a lot of songwriting and hopefully doing some recording soon as I get set back up.
Oh, okay. When you going to send me some more stuff?
Hopefully soon. As soon as I get the song I'm working on right now, as soon as I finish that, that's going to be something I'm going to be, I was thinking about shopping at one time, but I'm pretty much, at this point, I think I'm going to release it under myself. So,
oh, yeah, okay.
But I did some stuff with Corey Jacobs that I met on Bot Hangout. He did with him, and we met on that, and we've been writing. So.
Oh, cool. Okay, that's good. Good. All right. Well, we're looking for big things for you and from you.
Oh yeah.
And, yeah, I can feel it. Does this feel like this is your year?
Oh yeah, most definitely. Yeah. Because last year was a lot of just mostly planning a move and knowing that was coming up and not knowing when, but knowing it was coming, and then just preparing the house and stuff to do that. But and in the years prior, of course, with schooling. So last year, fortunately, I was able to do a lot of networking, with you guys and some other people in different Facebook groups and things like that I've met and did hangouts with. So last year, I was unintentionally networking. It really did not happen on purpose. Because I didn't have the ability, I didn't have the time to sit down and create. A lot of my time was kind of spent networking, which actually is going to help when these projects start coming out. So this year was to move down to Florida and take care of some business down here. So for this year, and then I'll be here until October, and so just trying to make the most of it while I have my parents down here to help my kids.
Good for you. Good for you. Well, yeah. I mean, I don't know if you were watching before you got on or anything. We're just kind of talking about compression and gear in general and everything, and some of the challenges everybody faces with compressors in particular, because that's always one of the biggest, hardest nuts to crack for people over the course of years. It took me quite a few years to finally just get it. But at the beginning, I was just kind of turning the knobs or parameters or whatever till I thought I heard something that sounded good, but I had a a cerebral definition in my mind from what I read from books and a few other things, but I didn't really get it, And so one day it just kind of, clicked and everything after a while. But up until then, and I don't know when that transition is different for everybody, but it seems to take everybody a long time to really just get it. You can put stuff on and think you're hearing it and everything, but then later on you find out, okay, I was really kind of overdoing it, or wasn't doing as good as I thought, because now I can hear subtle compression, really subtle things that back in the day when I was first trying to learn it and get it, I was just putting things on, and really when I was hearing what was happening, now I realize and recognize it, I was overdoing it. I went past the mark just because I couldn't hear the subtleties as well as I should have, So that's kind of what we're talking about right now, Angela. What kind of challenges have you faced with using and dealing with compressors, and what do you think you need to see help you out here?
Well, initially my thing was just understanding the parameters and just because I think I started off on the basic compressor from Pro Tools stock compressor, and just trying to just understand like what I was looking at there. I think I said this before. I know I've said this on another Hangout before, but it's like my aha moment came once when professor I had at Full Sail Fight Rin, he was talking about how well, at least with drums works probably the best. It was to measure the actual attack time from where you saw the waveform, where the attack starts, and then kind of like midway through, and then from that midway point to the end to get your release, and then that's like, of course, your starting point, not a hard like set in stone that this is what you need to set it at, but to get my starting point to be able to set the attack and release time, and then start playing with the threshold and listening and seeing what it was doing. I think I'm not gonna say I wouldn't say I'm a newbie or even a novice newbie with compression, but I wouldn't say I'm anywhere near advanced. I think it's just, to me, I'm still learning it, and I don't really know. I guess the challenge was always like, okay, where do I put the knee? Where do I set the ratio? And I think it all comes down to just listening and looking at it and seeing what you're doing and what you're hearing after you're fooling around with those settings. Because I've been given. I can see. You get these cheat sheets and what's good on this and what's good on that, and what's good on vocals and what ratio you should do for that. And they work to a certain extent, but it all boils down to listening to what you're working with.
Now, here's something interesting. This is for everybody. Chime in. In order of importance, who thinks? Let's go through all the things. Who thinks threshold is the most important? Who thinks ratio is the most important? Who thinks attack is the most important? Who thinks release is the most important? Or even down the meters, who thinks gain reduction is the most important? In order of importance, who thinks threshold is most important? Anybody?
On what source? I have to say, I hate to do that to you.
Yeah,
I would say on
any source. I'll just say any source, just in general, looking at it.
I suppose threshold is the same as same question as saying like when would you use a compressor. So
the threshold starts the conversation of how you're going to use the device.
Pretty much, yeah. So threshold's probably it, but
okay. Let's move through each one. So threshold, we got a couple people. What about ratio?
Don't know. This is a very abstract question. I don't.
I would go. If I would have to pick one, it would be threshold, just because you can't even see what the compressor's doing until you fool with the threshold. So.
Okay.
It has to grab it. So in order for it to grab the audio, you have to play with the threshold. So that would be one of them. I mean, if you had to choose, I mean, I would say they all work together. But if you had,
Does
if I had
anybody
to choose,
say attack or release at all? Can we eliminate those from the conversation? As far as being the top of the, so nobody's really saying attack or release. It's either going to be threshold or ratio.
Yeah, I would say threshold or ratio, because those are the things that are most noticeably going to make a compressor be a compressor. You know, I mean that's kind of the point. You know,
Yeah.
how much compression and when does it compress is really the start of the game.
Right, exactly.
And some of those terms, some manufacturers make interchangeable. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They'll combine two features into one knob. Some don't use ratio.
Well, let's
Some call gain threshold.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, let's look at this now. I'm doing this. I guess I'm doing this. I'm doing this for the benefit of everybody watching us too, because see, here's the thing. Now I say that I used to think it was threshold, but I think it's ratio. Why? Because there's been many times, and think about this if you've ever had this happen. You know, there's been many times when I put a compressor on something and had the threshold completely at the top, didn't do anything, and it was still capturing the sound, because depending on how whatever's coming in and how far the transients are going up, and until I turned the ratio a little bit, that's the only time it affected the sound, even if I never touched the threshold. Ratio is when anything happens, you know. Whereas if you turn the threshold down, you can put the threshold anywhere, but if the ratio has not been changed, nothing's going to happen. What do y'all think about that?
But at that point, are you really compressing the signal, or you're just really coloring it?
Well, that's the difference. So, for example, with a threshold, if I wanted to color the signal but not compress it, I would not touch the ratio at all, and I'd move the threshold down so it's affecting it more. But if we're talking about compressing or not compressing, and that's what I was talking about in the key of the thing, doing this for the benefit of everybody watching us, nothing happens until you take it off of 1-to-1, because then it's correlating. When you think of that little graph that everybody sees where it has the straight line reaching up and down and towards the bottom, and then the line going this way, nothing happens until that line starts bending. So, you know, it is an interesting thing, because I used to, this is why I'm having this conversation too, because it's a deeper thing, and as years have gone on, and I think about why I reach to go and do things and all that, and sometimes I'll do real slight compression. So I've done maybe slightly over 1-to-1, just maybe 1/2 to 1, because you may just want to impart something, but you may not necessarily need to compress. Like you said, great point, Jason. You might want to color the sound a bit, you know. And so what determines when the color kicks in is the threshold. So I would think that that's happening, and that'd be the more important parameter. But until you do something with the ratio before you start coloring it, you know, nothing happens. You can move that threshold all up and down all day long, but if it's 1-to-1, then what's going in is the same thing that's going out as far as coloring how the compression is doing. Now, if it's a sonic thing, like running through hardware, and we're just going through the electronics to color the sound electronically and sonically, that's a whole different conversation. Then we're not using it as a compressor. We're just using it as a color box, you know. And it doesn't even have to, if you're using it for that, it doesn't even have to be a compressor. You can run it through other things that impart a signature on it, you know. What do you guys think about that?
It's a valid argument. Definitely. But yeah, I mean, I can see it that way too, definitely. That's really interesting.
I never thought about it like that way.
Great conversation.
Yeah. It took me a while to get to that, to really realize, well, what's really happening when we're doing this, you know. And you know, sometimes the obvious things, you know, and I got to admit, at first I thought, you know, I used to think when we first started talking about it, like Angela said, her aha moment when attack and release was explained and everything, and that was another revelation for me. But then I had to think about, but we got plenty of compressors that don't have any attack and release controls. So understanding what's happening when the signal goes in one side and comes out the other is really the whole key. Thinking in terms of the LA2As and stuff like that. That like the LA2A, for example, has an input knob and then the ratio knob, but the input knob is not actually affecting the ratio. It's just affecting the input amplitude going in. Compare that to what's one that the input knob does affect the ratio. The harder it goes in, the more it's affecting the ratio. So different ones affect different things.
Yeah, absolutely. See, now,
interesting question.
damn you.
Interesting. Yeah. But that's some food for thought that I thought it would be good, and everybody that's watching us, and try some of these things. Mess with the parameters and see what happens. And this is a conversation piece, but it'll help glue the the definition of what compression is and what it's actually doing when you go to do it. It's not about the knobs. Everybody thinks about the different knobs that you turn and everything. So not any one thing is happening because all the manufacturers approach it differently. The way that things compress. Certain things. We haven't even talked about other things like opto versus solid state and stuff like that. How they're affecting what's going in and out, and how the colors and all that. So this is a deep conversation.
Oh yeah, I was just going to mention, opto. I was just going to mention opto versus everything else.
Mm-hmm.
It's so different. The way 1176 works versus an LA2A versus the way the 1176 style compression in a 610 works. Same style compression, but it's completely different, and it sounds completely different. It's compression is definitely a very, 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 very deep conversation with all the flavors and the options and the colors and the types and what you can do with each type. You want to crush the living hell out of something, you go for one kind of compressor versus another. You want subtle compression that doesn't color, or you want subtle compression that colors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Such a deep conversation, man.
It is, and all the other things that go in it. Think about a hybrid unit like the distressor that can simulate, all of these other things and everything, but it actually it can simulate opto and everything, but it's not using the actual optics to do it.
That's my favorite compressor in the world, by the way.
Say that again.
I said that's my favorite new compressor in the world.
I love
I do love it. It's beautiful on everything.
Yeah.
It's like a 160 on steroids.
Yeah.
Wait, which one was that?
The Empirical Labs.
Stressor, Empirical Labs. Yeah. The Empirical Labs distressor. Yeah, I love those, and man, yeah, it's very interesting because there's so many variables that come attached to these things, and running through, like you said, color and the sound. So running through a tube compressor versus the other ones that are solid state and that reacting fast, just running through some of those things might give you that smoothing over without you even having to do anything. So you understanding what you're trying to achieve and before you even do anything. So like the guy you were talking about that said, I want to get this and I want to get that and everything. Well, the biggest important question for him to ask is, well, why do you want to get it? Because what is compression to you? Understanding what you're trying to accomplish with these things, so important.
And that's always the big question when I'm talking, to these guys and my interns and stuff. Is it's always why. Tell me why.
Wow.
Tell me why you're doing what you're doing. Tell me why you put 8 plugins on this one thing to find this sound that this one would do. Maybe there's a reason you went that route instead of another one. I'm not saying it's wrong.
No.
Why?
Why?
Tell me why. Because if you can't give me a good reason, then as far as I'm concerned, it's wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, there's got to be a reason to the rhyme, you know?
Yeah. Or you're just randomly doing stuff and hoping you get lucky, you know, which sometimes you do. Like you said, all these guys that might have a stack of plugins on there, taking stuff out is just like, you know, I did the same thing like a lot of people probably do when you first start learning how to EQ, and you're boosting and cutting in all these areas, and then when somebody actually looks and shows you, look, man, you're boosting in this area, but right in that same thing, you started cutting, so you literally nulled out what you did. You didn't have to do any of that, you know. We all go through it. And once you finally get to the point of understanding why you're trying to do it, why are you grabbing the knob before you grab it, you know? I mean, I'm at the point now that I love it, so I actually can, when I hear a sound, I can see the compression in my mind before I grab anything. I see what I need to do to the waveform. I see it before and I see it after, you know, and say, okay, here's what I need to grab to get there, you know.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and it's that same thing when we talk, we go back to, so, you know, knowing what you're going to get before you get it, or getting it right at the source.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not just turn knobs for the sake of turning knobs. Let's turn knobs because you know what you want to get to, what your end result is, what you're hearing in your head. Know how to learn and know how to get that. Get to the destination. You know, I mean, you ain't gonna go nowhere if you don't know where the destination is.
Yep.
And then we're driving down the road and hoping that you find the place, but you don't do that nowadays. You pull out your phone, you get your GPS, and now you know where you're going.
Now you know where you're going. There's no reason to get lost. Yeah, it makes sense. What you say, Angela? Are you muted? Angelina? Okay.
I lost the window. I was over here messing with Logic. No, I didn't say anything. I'm all about the whole trial and error thing, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's how you learn. Yeah, for sure. You know,
there's nothing wrong with trial and error. You know, I mean, that's how most of it. That's how I'll tell you. That's how I learned, was trial and error.
I mean, that's how you initially, but then you have to kind of dig deeper.
I still think, though, even with the trial and error, though, you should kind of have an idea what you're trying to get out of that trial and error.
Yeah, you should have a thing, something in your mind.
You have a goal.
A go-to point. That's all about, and that's something I really, of course, as I started digging into mixing in general and reading books and things like that, is, I mean, the whole art to it is knowing where you want to go before you even touch anything, before you open up before you even go into mix, is knowing that endpoint. So, I mean, like right now, I was trying to do I had to reinstall Logic, and I'm going for, like, I have an idea of doing flipping I saw someone do a trick with reverse and, you know, the whole reverse reverb thing and all that stuff, and so I was like, you know, just, it's a trial and error thing for me, but I know what I'm trying to get and what tools I need to do to get there, even without watching a tutorial. Just in my mind, I know, okay, I want this sound going in, and then I want to put this reverb on it, and then I'm going to reverse it, and then I'm going to, you know, throw this on it, and I'm going to turn it back forward and see what it sounds like, you know. The good thing about this stuff is there's really no rules to it, but it's good to, you know, have some type of knowledge and starting point where you can go into it.
Well, hey Jason, I want to get your opinion on this too, because take, for example, we were talking about distorted guitars, for example, and distorted guitars by definition are already compressed. If you look at a raw recorded waveform, you just see it. I mean, everything's like that, you know. So why would you put a compressor on something like that? And that's one of those things where, but you can if you understand, if you think out what it is you're trying to get. So take, for example, something like that. I would never normally do it, knowing that, okay, my source already is in there, and the basic definition of compressing is to, you know, to squeeze and control the dynamics and get it in that certain place and all that, shave off things and all that. Well, I don't have to do this in this source, but there's something else I might want to do if I'm imagining compression in my mind as far as what a compressor will do. It's like, okay, I don't need the compressor to take on that role. Here's the role that I might want to do, though, before I even put it on. I'm listening to a distorted guitar, and I start thinking, that guitar is nice. And right away, I already know it doesn't really need compression, but it needs something. So I might do something as simple as, you know what? I wonder what will happen if I run that through a Fairchild and don't, I'm not trying to compress. I don't need it to compress, but I just want to run it through that Fairchild because I know what that Fairchild does to stuff, to just kind of suddenly make it turn into the beast and everything, just going through it. Not, you don't even see anything moving once it's going through it, but just going. So having that kind of an understanding of what it is you're trying to accomplish, where you're trying to go with that sound, it's like, well, you might throw it through the compressor, but why are you doing it? You're not doing it to compress. You're doing it to achieve this thing. What do you think about that?
One of the things I tend to do when I record guitars is actually just that. SSL channel strip with the compressor turned on but nothing turned up.
Yeah.
Just this over. It just gives this. I mean, and it really depends on the genre. I mean, when you're talking like extreme technical metal, you kind of want that aggressiveness and that and everything to be real sharp. But sometimes if you're doing like a rock tune, like a southern rock kind of thing, or just a straight up rock tune, sometimes you just want that smoothness in the guitars a little bit, and I find that I love the SSL channel strip on everything, but that's just me. But yeah, I mean, definitely things like that. And when I was saying earlier, like, I don't compress distorted guitars, I mean, I've definitely put compression on distorted guitars, but not in like the traditional sense of really trying to control dynamics.
Right.
Because those dynamics are pretty much controlled already. I mean, let's take nowadays. You have 6-string guitar, you got 7-string guitar, 8-string guitar, 9-string guitar. They're all tuned down to this god awful frequencies that should be the bass. But sometimes just to get a little bit of control of the low end. Sometimes you high pass and you still have just this little bit of some of that low mid that's still just a little. Every time you palm mute, you get like little bumps. So you throw a little compression on that. I tend to not think about that as really. I mean, it's compressing, but when I think of compression, I think like what you do to drums and what you to vocals, really controlling the overall dynamic of it. Or with drums, bringing out the punch, things like that. That for me is more when I think of compression. I kind of look at it the way Joe Barresi does, as a good way to put it.
Yeah. I think that's a good way to look at it, and see, so many people get caught up in thinking it's this magical thing, but there's a reason why you do it in the first place. There's a reason why it was invented, because a lot of the earlier records, it didn't exist at first, So, same thing with EQ and all that. You got to understand why it is you're trying to do certain things. Why, why do you need certain frequencies to poke out? Why do you need others to be dipped out or whatever, just having an understanding of what you're trying to get to. I mean, it's so important. So I think this discussion here has been very healthy and helpful to a lot of people. A lot of you guys watching us, this is what we do. We like to have debates from all different points of view, all different experience levels, all different genres of music and everything, so that you can apply some of these things to what you're doing, or at least have a conversation in your mind with yourself. Because too many people don't talk to. I talk to myself all the time. I like my own conversation because it's like I want to know. I want to ask the right questions, and challenge stuff that's going on. The things that I learned before, I've changed a lot of things that I used to believe early on. I don't believe them anymore. I've shifted a lot of things and everything, because when you start gaining understanding by asking and deconstructing, I think it really will get you there a lot faster and everything. So, yeah, man, great answers, everybody. So we've been on here for a little over an hour and a half now. If anybody else has any final words or anything on this, we'll wrap it up for the day.
Somebody please just invent a piece of gear that no matter what you put through it, it sucks out all the 450, please.
That's funny. That's funny. Oh man, what's interesting too is I can't remember. Dave could probably remember too. Remember there was this inline thing that you would put on your drums that would take out that area of it wouldn't allow you to even record it. I forget what it was. It was a little hardware piece of gear. We would put it on kick drums and snare
Talking
drums.
about key packs?
Huh?
You talking about the key packs?
No. It was some kind of a little inline filter that you actually put on your mic lines, and it will kind of just scoop out that one little area that
I remember
get rid of
that.
anyway. So it didn't even allow you to capture it.
Little plug-in thing, yeah.
Yeah, I forget what it was. Yeah, we used to use it back in the day. Yeah, that can be nasty up in there. Yeah, guys. So I mean, it's very, very helpful. I'm Jason and everybody. I'm going to be releasing very shortly. I've been working on it diligently because this is exactly why I wanted to have a conversation about compressors in particular, because this is one of the top questions that I always get, and it remains one of the most baffling things for most people. So I've got some great stuff that's going to be very super helpful for everybody that I think is going to be unlike anything anybody's seen before. It's going to go deeper, and I really think it's going to be something that's going to help the process get shortcut amazingly fast to understanding. So I'm pretty excited. I'll let you guys know about it a little bit later. I'm not quite all there yet. I want to make sure it's just right and I've got all the right information. But if you want to send me any emails or whatever about something that you think that I definitely should not miss to put in a compression product, send it to me and I'll definitely see what I can do. Anything that you got any struggles or problems or challenges that you want me to address, send it to me and I'll check it out and see what I can do. Anyway, if anybody has any final things, say it now, or forever hold your peace. We're going to wrap it up for today. All right, guys. Well, everybody have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will catch you on the next Hangout. Bye.
Have a good one, guys.